Welcome, everybody. It is so good to see your faces in my little Zoom squares today. We are very, very happy to welcome you to today's Sacred Sunday Sit at Community Meditation Center. A very warm welcome to any of you who might be here for the first time with us. And of course, that warm welcome also extends to all of you who are regular members of this Sangha and community. My name is Jessica Mingus. My pronouns are she, her, and I am very, very pleased to host this morning here on the East Coast our dear Vera Ruangtragool, who will be teaching us today. We always have a wonderful session when she is guiding us through our practice. So I will be passing things over to her in just a moment. But before I do that, wanted to share just a couple of notes about how the session will unfold for anyone that may not be familiar. So in just a moment, when Vera takes over, she will guide us in a meditation of about 25 minutes. And at 11 o'clock Eastern, we'll transition from that to take a moment to reflect on generosity, called Dāna, which is really at the heart of Buddhist practice and certainly at the heart of what makes CMC the wonderful place that it is. And then Vera will offer a teaching. So each week we have a selected theme that is part of kind of a larger topic that we delve into over a course of at least a month, if not more. So that will happen. Her teaching will last until about 11:45. And then at that point, we will open up the space to have your perspectives, your input offered to the community. So if you have any questions, if you have reflections about anything that comes up about your own practice or your lived experience throughout our time together, feel welcome to share those thoughts in the chat. And at 11:45, I'll start to read some of those to Vera for her response. And then at 12 o'clock, when we end the formal practice session, we open up breakout rooms. So if you have 15 extra minutes, we encourage you to continue practicing with us in small groups. You will have the power of unmuting and will be able to be in conversation with a couple of members of this wonderful community to continue reflecting together. And so before we pass things to Vera for our meditation, we always like to do two things when we get started on Sundays. And the first is just to invite members of the Sangha to let us know where you are tuning in from. So we always like to call our 90 minutes on Sunday our mini retreat. So where is your retreat center for today? So feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. And I'll read a little bit of that out. So we have friends in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which is CMC's hometown, friends in Connecticut, upstate New York, Hudson Valley, Mexico, Park Slope, Brooklyn, my hometown, South Georgia, the Bronx, Massachusetts, Ireland. So welcoming everyone, and it is so deeply special for us to get to be together across distance and boundaries. So this is a very special Sangha because of its diversity in terms of where we all can access practice together from. And so before Vera guides us in a meditation, our last ritual is to give each other a warm community wave. So if you are on camera, give us a warm hello. If you are on the phone and you actually can't see us, there are many smiling people waving at you, saying a heartfelt welcome. And we are so, so happy, Vera, to have you back with us. I think this is the second time that you've taught this year, but we are just always so happy to have your wisdom and your thoughtfulness in our community when you teach. So good morning.
Good morning, and thank you all. It's always an honor to be here with everyone in community. And, we co-create this space, and your presence, your practice, your offerings are what makes these teachings come alive, right? So thank you for showing up. That is probably most of the battle, right? Showing up and practicing with presence. Or at least the intention of presence. Whether we maintain, however much presence we actually have during the meditation, that's up to various causes and conditions, right? But we have this intention to practice, and that is a most beautiful thing. So today's topic, which we will definitely delve into in greater detail, is on mindfulness, right? Specifically mindfulness of feelings or feeling tone. And I thought for today's meditation practice, I'll offer some visual imagery that, if it's helpful for you, please feel free to use it, to take it on. If you have something else that helps you to stay present in a relaxed way, feel free to use that. Disregard the suggestions that I'm offering. And the thing is to really tune into what works for you. Right? So we're cultivating a sense of presence with whatever experience we have, and see if we can invite in a sense of ease and relaxedness to it. Right. And so one of the imageries that is I found very helpful, right, is to imagine ourselves like observers. We are watching a movie. Right? As we're meditating, we can imagine ourselves as audience members, right? The action is happening in front of us, right? There's actors on the stage, on the screen, but we ourselves are in this moment not the actors, right? So whatever's happening, we just watch peacefully, neutrally, with a sense of curiosity, right? So it's a real shift into observer mode and less of doing, um, acting mode. Right? So if that's an image that is helpful for you, to just whatever goes on by, whatever sequence happens to pop up on the landscape, we just see how it goes. Another image that I'll introduce is the image of the mind like sky. Right. So this is where you can imagine the mind, our awareness, like this vast open sky. And in this sky, right, it encompasses everything. But you are this sky that is simply existing. And there's going to be things floating on by, right? Thoughts in the form of clouds that you might see. But we just kind of let them do their thing. Right? So that's just one imagery that I'll get into during our practice. If it's helpful, please take it on. Otherwise, follow your own practice. Right? Perhaps it is resting with your breath, with the physical sensation of the body breathing. Right? That is a beautiful object to rest with. if that feels easy. You could also rest with the feeling of relaxedness, right? That is something that the mind can connect to. But first off, once you're in a position to set aside all the things that we have on our plate, you can find a comfortable seat or a resting position. You've had this beautiful intention to make it here. And you are here. You have made it. So in this moment, we invite ourselves to release everything, release the usual to-dos, the usual plans, the going-ons in the mind. Tuning into this body that has come to rest. And maybe there's still some momentum of movement. And just know that all experience that we have right now is valid. It's just the result of various causes and conditions coming up. So if we find ourselves a little tense, right, is there something we can do to release, to stretch, to move? Doing whatever we need that supports ourselves to release, to ease into this moment. And there's no rush to close the eyes if that's not where we're at. We can still tune in to our sense of presence physically. And for those who practice with the eyes closed in this moment, just make sure that the eyelids are nice and soft. Very loosely touching each other. Inviting every part of the body from the top of the head down to the toes to release. To whatever extent is possible. With kindness towards our practice. Taking the body and the mind for where they're at. If we notice the urge to hurry things along, just simply notice that. Bring in some kindness. Easing and softening wherever we can, to whatever extent we can. Feeling the body easing into our cushion. the muscles no longer needing to hold on. So we allow them to be without any resistance, without any holding on. Easy and relaxed. Like a snow globe that has been swirling around all day, all night. And we finally let it sit. And the contents are still swirling around, but bit by bit, just by maintaining the body and the mind relaxed, calm, and still. Everything's starting to settle naturally. Knowing that we can adjust at any time. Anytime we notice physical or mental tension, we can bring in some ease in some way. Taking a deep breath, adjusting your position, whatever you need. And we allow ourselves to rest here with a mind like the sky, open, spacious, expansive. Whatever happens to come up in our experience, we know that we're still here. There might be at some moments different clouds, different thoughts popping up from time to time, or very rapidly. But we simply observe with this ease of a bright sky, knowing that these clouds will pass on by. Some will move faster, some will move slower. Sometimes there's a thunderstorm. But whenever these things come into the horizon, we can simply recognize that, oh, this is just a cloud passing through. Nothing to hold on to, nothing to resist. And we rest in this spacious, calm, and accepting awareness. But not rushing anything at all. Knowing that there's no hurry to be a certain way. Nothing else to do. Nothing different to see. with kind acceptance of this current moment. Knowing that this too shall pass. If this feels easy, this can be all that you do. Just resting with this calm, neutral awareness. Continuing to release and relax. And just tune in to this relaxed and spacious feeling. Resting neutrally. If you need a little something more to maintain our attention here, you can rest your attention on whatever feels easiest, effortless. Maybe it's tuning into the feeling of the breath. Connecting to the point you notice it most. Maybe it's helpful to connect with the feeling of your center, a brightness, sense of lightness within you. Or you can rest your attention by repeating a word or phrase, a mantra, and just letting the sound gently echo again and again. So let us enjoy releasing, allowing, and tuning in neutrally, relaxingly. The mind expansive like the sky. Allowing the mind to rest. In this way, as we continue in the next few minutes in silence together.
Friends, I apologize. Give me one moment because my Zoom, for some reason, my computer froze for a moment. So as we transition out of this meditation, we'll have just one extra moment of silence as I find myself back into our community here. Okay. I gave Vera a little bit of a surprise because I'm always the one to ring the bell at 11, but because my computer was frozen and my video was off, she wasn't entirely sure where I had gone, but I promise I was here with you all. So, Vera, thank you for that beautiful, beautiful practice. It just brought this really palpable kind of calm into my nervous system, which I especially value today because, as I shared with Vera before we got started, as many of you know, do disability justice work. Um, and over the last week, have been working incredibly hard with a team of fellow parent advocates and community organizers to address um, some pretty significant systemic harm that has been playing out in my son's school district. So, um, my son has an IEP. He has a learning disability, and so he receives all sorts of specialized supports in school. And one of those supports is the daily presence of a phenomenal paraprofessional. So, really, his partner in learning, who for the last 3.5 years has been with him every step of the way through his journey in school. Um, school ended for my kiddo last week, and I was wheeling a cart full of flowers and all sorts of special treats for my son's teachers. And I saw um, all of the educators had this really grim look on their face, and I couldn't tell exactly why. And it turned out that the night before, they had all the paraprofessionals in our district, nearly 200 people who pour so much deep care into our schools, all received a letter that they were losing their jobs. And the larger community did not see it coming. So, on a day that was anticipated to be one of celebration and also a really deep exhale, because of those of us who have children with more support needs, getting through the school year can be quite a journey, and we're all very tired. So we got a big surprise and have been working together doing this really sort of big community organizing campaign to raise awareness about what's happening in our community and why everybody needs to care. Um, and so there was a delegation of us that spent about 7 hours at a Board of Education meeting last week that ran until 2 o'clock in the morning. And on the basis of what we witnessed, the sort of um, resistance and disregard to our experiences and our input, I could not fall asleep that night. So I wound up getting to bed at about 5 o'clock in the morning. And my nervous system has been incredibly dysregulated since then, until this practice with all of you, those 25 minutes, Vera, that you just offered us. But the controversy, this sort of crisis playing out in my community really has had me thinking about generosity quite a bit. Um, because, as I have often shared in some of my Dāna talks here, special education parents are some of the most overwhelmed, overtaxed, spread thin caregivers there are. And yet, when someone in the community needs some kind of support, they are the first ones to jump in and offer what they can. So I saw so many beautiful examples of generosity over the course of this week in its collective form, right? And I was thinking so much also about the relationship between generosity and transformative change, right? Because in this case, in the span of the 1 week that we had between getting this terrible news and organizing a really big public response at the board meeting, there was a community of hundreds of caregivers that really chipped in whatever way they can to build this loving response to broad sweeping harm. So we had some parents who were in a core organizing team with me. We were drafting statements, petitions, engaging with all sorts of stakeholders in the community. And then there were the folks that volunteered on the day of the meeting to be readers of our public statement. So we had 2 minutes each at this board meeting to speak to the community. And we wound up with this line of almost a dozen caregivers who had volunteered their time to come to this meeting and say, right, the well-being of all of us and all of our kids matters so deeply that I will offer myself in this way. And then there were the caregivers that offered their time taking care of other people's children so that many of us were able to attend a 7-hour meeting. Um, and it was just an incredibly powerful reminder to me that generosity is so different from being nice. In the same way that it's also very different from, niceness is quite different from being kind. And so it's pretty easy to be nice, but to be generous, to be kind, actually takes so much intention. And it's a muscle, right? It's a muscle for us to strengthen. And of course, whenever I think about generosity and community, then I always come back to thinking about CMC, because this is another space in my world where I really see generosity in the collective form play out all the time. So, for any of you who might be new to CMC, this is a community that is completely sustained by the generosity of our community. So, we have board members who generously contribute their time to oversee the operations of CMC and make sure that we are always operating in alignment with our values. And we have an incredible community of volunteers who, in all of these different ways, are plugging in a deeper way to the community to offer generosity and support. So, on that note, we've been talking for a little while about the desire to not only offer audio recordings of our teachings every week, but also to offer video. So, in the coming 1 to 2 weeks, hopefully this week, thanks to the generosity of a dear member of this Sangha, Vin, we will be launching our YouTube channel. And so there will be a new way for all of you, if you wish to revisit a talk or if you weren't able to attend, or also for folks just out in the world who might be looking for practice and community and healing, and all of the sort of power of practice, there is going to be this new way for people to discover CMC and join us here. So I will share in just a moment some information about ways that you can contribute to CMC. Of course, every single dollar contributed to the organization is what makes it possible for us to have wonderful teachers like Vera join us from week to week to share their wisdom. But there are so many other ways to get involved and to practice your generosity in the space of this community. And so, the last thing I'll mention before I pass things back to you, Vera, is that we have a really exciting program of some fall in-person events that we've been working hard to coordinate during this spring. So, in particular, one of the ways that it would be incredibly helpful to receive the generosity of this community is in the form of volunteering to be part of these in-person events. So, in addition to information about ways to contribute to the CMC, I will also be sharing some information about how to sign up to volunteer if you are local to New York City and able to join us for one of those practices. But sending you all so much gratitude. Having this anchor in our week, I think, is so deeply important, such a necessary reset, because I know for me, going into Monday, I will be so much more effective in my work if I tend to my harm and my hurt and my heart in a way that is really intentional and rooted in care. And so we're building that together here. So thank you all. And dear Vera, looking forward so much to your teaching.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing all that's going on, right? And I'm so glad to see that generosity in action, right? Because it really, this is what it takes, right? For people to come together with intentional practice and presence. So, thank you. So thank you all for your practice, for taking the time to put in the effort. And hopefully it felt a little bit more effortless. But even if it felt effortful, just know that your experience is valid. Okay. As we're here this month studying the topic of mindfulness, a topic that the Buddha considers to be a foundational practice that can directly lead us to full awakening, enlightenment. So the more that we can practice, the more that we can kind of get into the nuances, right? This can lead us to full understanding and full release. So in Pali, the language of the Buddha's time, mindfulness is called sati. And it has a wide variety of concepts in this word, right? There's the aspect of recognition, the knowing what's happening as it's happening, the aspect of memory and recollection, right? So you remember something and you bring something to mind. There's discernment. This is a part that we often don't see highlighted as much in the Western kind of offerings of this teaching, right? But there's discernment in mindfulness that allows us to identify experiences as wholesome, supportive, or unwholesome, unsupportive. So mindfulness is a great topic that we get to delve in. I've talked to folks in the past who have said that, they practice mindfulness, but it feels so overwhelming because they're mindful of everything. And so a good question for our practice is, what exactly are we being mindful of? Right. And luckily for us, the Buddha offered some guidance on what to be mindful of while meditating. with his offering of the teaching of the 4 foundations of mindfulness in the Satipatthana Sutta. And I'm so glad I get to reflect on this topic because mindfulness has been at the forefront of my practice these past few weeks. Just some personal updates for you all. I actually broke my ankle 6 weeks ago, and I've had to be mindful of every step, every movement, mindful of my attitude to support my healing in the best way possible. And I'll definitely share more about this in a little bit. Right, but in the teachings on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha instructs us to begin by contemplating with awareness the body, then feeling tones, then our state of mind, and then the nature of reality itself. And last week at CMC, Nakaway Cuevas reflected on mindfulness of body. So today we'll explore mindfulness of Vedanā, aka feeling tone. So Vedanā is a Pali word that's often translated into English as feeling. And when we hear the word feeling in the English context, a lot of us might think about it in terms of emotions, right? But in the Buddhist context, the meaning of feeling, of Vedana, is quite specific. And it isn't referring to emotions. Vedana comes before emotions are even formed. Right? So Vedana is taking us to a very basic level of human experience. Before you even form a thought about it, before you even identify or conceptualize what this experience is. It's what happens when something first connects with our senses and we start to perceive it. So Vedana refers to the affective quality of experience. So Joseph Goldstein describes this as the taste we have of an experience. Right? We call it the feeling tone. So any experience we have through contact with our senses has a feeling tone. And we can categorize any experience as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant, neutral. And this feeling can be a bodily feeling and a mental feeling. Right? So what you feel in the body, what you feel in the mind. So this is a topic that can get really complicated and heady. You know, this Buddhist psychology of the mind, the human experience, or just experience generally. So I just thought I'd offer a basic rundown of how an experience, conscious reality arises based on the Buddhist teachings, starting with the concept of ayatana, uh, the 12 sense bases. So as humans, we are endowed with various sense faculties, sense organs. All right, we know these as the eye, allowing for sight, the ear, allowing for hearing, the nose, allowing for smell, the tongue, allowing for taste, the body, allowing for touch. And I'm not going to stop there because in the Buddhist conceptualization of senses, there's another one, a sixth one, the mind. Right? And this mind sense organ is what allows us to sense mental activity. And so, okay, we have these 6 sense organs, sense faculties that are considered internal to us, within us. Now, what do these sense organs connect with, right? Connect to? They connect with what the Buddha calls external sense objects. So these are visible forms, these are sounds, these are odors, these are tastes, these are tangible objects, and also mental objects in the form of thoughts, ideas, emotions. Okay, so now these are called the six external sense objects. So when we combine the internal six and the external six, this is what the Buddha refers to as the 12 sense bases or the 12 sense spheres. Right? So how does an experience arise? How do we, how does it come into existence? How do we know about it? So an experience arises when your internal sense faculties, these sense organs, connect with these external sense objects, and you have consciousness about it, right? So your senses connecting with something external, you're aware of it, and then bam, in the Buddhist context, they call it contact. An experience arises. You become, something becomes present. And what follows immediately after is this concept of Vedana, feeling tone. So the moment that we see something, we hear something, taste, smell, sense something within the body, think something in the mind, a feeling tone arises. So let's say you're going along about your day, just simply existing, and your nose connects with a certain smell, and you're aware of it, you're conscious of it. Like bam, an experience arises. And that experience, that initial kind of experience of the experience, has a tone to it. Um, if it's the smell of your favorite food, right, the feeling tone is pleasant, right? If it's stinky dog poop, or even worse for, your cat, if you're a cat owner, you know this, cat poop, it's terrible, right? Then the feeling tone is unpleasant. If it's an unfamiliar smell, it might come off as either pleasant or unpleasant, maybe more neutral. So the formula is sense faculty plus sense object plus consciousness equals contact. And then immediately after is feeling, Vedana. Now, the thing with this is that if there's no consciousness, no awareness that this is happening, then you don't really have anything that is produced, right? Let's say you're sleeping or you're going about lost in thought and there's a sound somewhere, but the mind isn't really paying attention, right? You don't notice it. So, it doesn't come into your internal landscape, so to speak. So you need kind of these three different areas, the sense faculty, the sense object, and consciousness to come together. Okay, so now what comes after feeling tone? Vedana. We start to identify and conceptualize what it is, this thing that's there. This is perception. Then right after perception comes processing what's been perceived. And so then we form thoughts about it. We have certain emotions. We form ideas. We have stories, judgments, reactions towards that. So after feeling tone, this is where craving typically arises, right? And so we're getting at the heart of the Buddhist practice on this, right? Because let's say we smell something, right? There's this olfactory consciousness in the smell. Oh, it smells pleasant. That's feeling tone. Oh, that's nice. What is it? Oh, it's freshly baked bread. Right, that's perception. Oh, freshly baked bread is delicious. I love it. There's a judgment there. I want some freshly baked bread right now. Right? That's a sense of craving, that wanting. Or let's say we smell something, okay? Sense, smell consciousness. Oh, that smells unpleasant. Feeling tone. What is that smell? Oh, it's cat poop, right? Perception. You realize, okay, it's cat poop. That is nasty. Right? You have judgment there. I don't want to be smelling this. Please take it far, far away from me. Right? And that is aversion. So aversion is considered part of craving as well, because it's the desire for something to not be a certain way, to not be here. Okay. And if it's something we register as neither pleasant nor unpleasant, maybe we're neutral towards it. We might not have a reaction to it. Maybe we're indifferent or we just ignore it. So, why am I bringing this up? The Buddha taught that understanding the true nature of these sense bases and having mindfulness of this process can lead us to non attachment and to reduce and ease up on the suffering that we experience. Right. So, first off, these sense bases are the doorway to which the mind connects with the world. Right. This is how the body and the mind work together to create experience. And it shows that feeling and then perception comes from this contact between the senses plus the outside world and consciousness. Right. And this process is the beginning of how we think, we speak, we act, and helps us to see how our experiences shape our lives. Right. So, this is a core part of the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination that explains the cycle of existence and where suffering comes about. Right. But I also wanted to add that being human means that we have these sense faculties, right? To have feelings that naturally arise from all this sensory input is to be human. And the other day, I was walking around in my medical ankle boot, and I was walking past this guy sitting on the bench, and he says to me, "You got a big boo boo?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a big boo boo." And he goes, "Well, you got to be alive in order to feel pain, right?" I'm like, so true, right? And it stayed with me because yeah, to feel is a sign that we are alive. What a blessing it is to be alive, even if those feelings are considered unpleasant ones. So the issue isn't that we have feelings. I mean, we're human after all. This is our nature, our existential makeup. The issue that the Buddha pointed out is that, first off, we're not guarding our sense doors mindfully. That's to say, we're not mindful of the things we're consuming and exposing ourselves to through the senses. And two, we have a tendency to go from simply having a pleasant, unpleasant, neutral experience, sensation, to labeling it as good or bad. And almost automatically, almost immediately, go from wanting, go to wanting more of these pleasant feelings and then wanting less of the unpleasant feelings. Right? This happens in less than a tenth of a second. And it's usually so immediate, so automatic that we usually don't even notice this happening. If we do notice something, it's maybe later on down the line, down the reaction chain where, oh, you notice, okay, I have a certain thought about it, a certain opinion, maybe an emotion that's developed afterwards. Or maybe we don't even notice the emotion. We just notice we feel stressed or tense in some way. So, as something that has come up for me in the past is, what's the big deal, about wanting pleasant experiences and not wanting unpleasant ones, right? Isn't that natural? Right? I remember once thinking to myself that, right? What's so bad about getting what we want? It feels good to get what we want, right? Yeah, let's keep getting more of what we want. But it was when I realized after that that what causes suffering isn't necessarily the getting what we want. It's what happens when we don't get it, right? When we don't get what we want because things are shifting, things are changing. There's a woman monk during the Buddha's time, Tamadina. She said in one of the suttas, pleasant feeling is pleasant when it persists and painful when it changes. Right? So because we have this natural universal law of existence, that all existence is impermanent, nothing is staying the same. What causes our suffering is our attachment to what is pleasant and our aversion or resistance to what is unpleasant in this ecosystem that's constantly shifting, right? Let's say we don't have attachment to what's pleasant, no resistance to what's unpleasant. This, you know, is an allowance of acceptance for how things are, right? And acceptance doesn't mean complacency, nor does it mean not acting based on the situation. At the very least, it means that we're not resisting reality or trying to put so much effort to try to control or push things to be a certain way when all the conditions are pushing for a different way. Right? We're not stressed or distraught by the way things are, and we can see reality with kind of these fresh, open eyes. In that way, there's so much stress that can be lifted and spaciousness created when we don't try to resist or try to control conditions that are beyond our control. Right? There is freedom from reactivity. So, why is this practice of mindfulness of Vedana, feeling tone, so important? Mindfulness of Vedana helps us to see the root of our experiences and where our reactivity lies. So, this is because so much of our time we go about our lives on autopilot. Right? We have very deeply ingrained habits and behaviors. When someone says something we don't like, we often immediately respond with displeasure. When a family member says something we don't like, forget about it. Our negative reaction is instantaneous. Right? Sometimes it feels easier to give strangers grace and to create space for them and not take it personally than it is with our own family members or close friends, right? So by observing our sensory feelings with mindfulness and equanimity, instead of reacting to them, our usual chain of reactivity is broken. With practice, we can detect when something happens, we can notice how it feels, and perhaps we can just leave it at that. We don't automatically jump to liking or disliking and then craving or aversion. When something happens, we, with practice, notice with mindfulness, and we take that experience just as it is and move on. Right? In this way, we are preventing craving from ever taking root. And remember, it's this craving, this attachment, that is causing us a lot of suffering, extra suffering. So I'd like to share an experience where I actually was able to practice this. I feel very proud of myself for being able to do this. I was in California about 6 weeks ago visiting family. And usually during these trips, I work out with a personal trainer my dad goes to once a week. This trainer is also a gymnast. And I shared with him that I used to compete in gymnastics when I was younger. And he invited me to go to a gymnastics gym nearby for open gym hours that evening. And so I was pretty excited. Right? I hadn't done gymnastics in exactly 30 years. And, my parents and my husband were out of town. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go. Um, I'm going to just work on basic stuff, right? Handstand, splits, anything else my body can handle. So I get there. I go to the gymnastics floor. I start warming up, doing some simple stretches, right? Getting the body a little warmed up. And I'm on the floor and I'm like, oh, wow, I forgot how bouncy this gymnastics floor is. And for those who don't know, the gymnastics floors have springs underneath to help gymnasts tumble and for shock absorption. And so it's been 30 years. I forgot how bouncy it is. So I start jumping, kind of testing the bounciness. I jump a little higher, right? And then on one of these jumps, as I jump, as I'm landing on the floor, my right ankle rolls in, right? There is a big pop. And immediately I'm down on the ground, holding my ankle. And then I'm thinking, oh, wow. Hmm, okay. The ankle hurts, right? Maybe I sprained it. Oh, I guess this means I won't be able to do any interesting gymnastics tricks today. And I was like, oh, I was actually going to start training for powerlifting. I guess I won't be able to do that for now. But overall, I'm pretty calm and collected. I didn't scream. I didn't shout internally or externally. I didn't worry about what came next. I felt pretty neutral. My ankle was in pain, right? But internally, I was neutral. And all of this happens in a split second, right? The sound from my ankle was so loud that the gymnastics coach, standing about 20 feet away, hears it, comes over with ice and tape. And I'm having a normal, calm conversation with him, taping up my ankle, trying to walk around on it. And, for the few minutes afterwards, I was still able to walk around and even do some handstands. But after an hour, the pain increases to the point where the trainer who invited me suggests I should go home while I can still drive back. I'm so glad I did because the moment I got home, took off the tape, could not put weight on it. Right. So this is where I really had to put a lot of mindfulness practice in. There's no one home, right? So I had to figure out what do I need to do. I'm hopping around on one leg, hopping up the stairs, figuring out a way to get myself into the bathtub, showering, balancing on one leg, right? Mindfulness, full practice. One movement, one hop, one moment. No regrets about what happened. No thoughts about how it's going to affect me in the future, right? Surprisingly. And the next day, I go to urgent care. They take x-rays and confirm it's a complete fracture on the, you have that bump on the outside of your ankle bone. It's like right there. I'm given boots, crutches, and a timeline of at least 6 weeks, right, for it to heal. So I very much surprised myself with this calm and neutral reaction. And I think it's from these years of practice, right? Realizing it or not. And what's interesting is that I've continued to feel pretty neutral about it, pretty non-reactive, and able to take this as a learning opportunity. Right? And I feel pretty proud of myself, right? Because a lot of people I've interacted with have expressed sympathy, right? What a bummer it is, how sorry they feel. I had to go through this. And I'm just surprising myself with how neutral I'm able to approach the situation, right? Because in the past, I could imagine myself, I have done this before, where if I wasn't mindful, you know, if that major thing happened, I would be like, cursing, right? Like, beep, 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 that sucks. I was gonna start powerlifting. Now I can't do that anymore. Oh, great, being in crutches sucks. My armpits hurt. Am I gonna heal properly? When can I get back to normal? might not have complications in the future, like all of these very natural kind of reactions, right? But these natural reactions would probably cause me to be a big ball of stress, walking around with this negative feeling, this anxiety. But instead, with practice of mindfulness, um, I am able to feel more open, grounded, and even grateful. So, one thing that I wanted to highlight for today, one insight that taken from this experience, is that not everything needs a response, right? Not everything needs an internal response, at least. Right? Very human to feel, but it doesn't mean that we always need to respond to every feeling, right? The fact that we have senses, there's always going to be sensory input, but reacting doesn't have to be the default, right? Not everything has to become something we'd have to deal with. Right? So, as many of you might be familiar with, there's this teaching from the Buddha on the arrow, where the Buddha highlights how it's possible to have two different experiences for the same painful situation. Right? He brings up the example of someone being shot with an arrow, and that person experiences physical pain, right, with that arrow. But then, if that person reacts emotionally, let's say sorrow, grieving, lamenting, um, right, experiencing distress to those painful physical feelings, this is like they're being hit with two arrows instead of just one. Right? The first one physical, the second one emotional or mental. On the other hand, there's the case where someone experiences something painful, but recognizes it as such, doesn't resist it. That person is only hit with one arrow, the physical pain, and spared the emotional pain. Right? Some things just hurt. Right? Sharon Salzberg says this a lot. And experiencing loss, sickness, death, like these things are painful. Stepping on Legos, right? Like something to reflect on in our life is whether we're shooting ourselves with extra arrows, in an already painful experience by reacting and resisting that difficult experience. Right? But I know it's much easier said than done. Yeah, just don't react. Sure. Right. Very easy. Right? But with practice, with presence, with loving awareness, with patience, with more practice, we might notice over time that, maybe the time we spend reacting to something decreases. We might catch ourselves faster. And with more practice, we might notice certain moments where, oh, I actually didn't react to that, right? Or I was pretty cool and impersonal about it. Maybe we might react with less intensity. Right? We start to see as we continue practicing what are the conditions that support our mindfulness, our non-reactivity, and what hinders it. So this is a lot, but I just love to leave us with another thing that has been helpful for me as I practice this mindfulness of Vedanā, and which I saw rear up, when crisis happened. It's the cultivating of a wise attitude of acceptance and seeing the experience as a learning opportunity. So Stephen Batchelor, who's been here to CMC, beautifully describes awareness as a process of deepening self-acceptance. Whatever it observes, it embraces. There's nothing unworthy of acceptance. Right? And then lastly, these words that have been very helpful for me by the Burmese teacher Sayadaw U Tejaniya. Whatever you're experiencing in this moment is the right experience. There's no need to be happy or unhappy with what is happening. There's no need to like or dislike the experience. With right attitude, there's no preference, no seeking for something we think is good or pleasant or preferable, nor is there any pushing away of what we think is bad, unpleasant, undesirable. There's only the interest to watch and to learn. That's why we stay open and available to all experience, pleasant or unpleasant. And so this is where I'd love to open it all up to you, this wise community. Like any reflections coming up for you, any experiences that you'd like to share, maybe something that's helped you simply be with an experience. Right? Have you ever been able to be hit with just one arrow without adding a second? Right? Or any challenges that have come up? Right? If anything is coming up for you, feel free to share.
Oh, Vera, that was so powerful. It resonated so deeply with me in terms of what I've been going through over this last week. And you really have me reflecting on those 3 hours on Friday morning that I was just unable to get myself to sleep, unable to calm myself down enough, right? And kind of trying to reckon with exactly what was at play, what was going on for me. We have some wonderful questions and reflections coming in. So I'll start with a commenting question from Karsten, who said, I've always found understanding the mind as a sense organ puzzling. In the case of the other sense organs, there's a clear contact with some external object. But what the mind is in contact with, i.e., a thought, is also an internal mental process. Furthermore, the mind is not an independent substance, but is the totality of internal mental processes. The only way I can understand this is that there is a specific mental process, like a thought, and another mental process, which is a feeling about that mental process, positive, negative, or neutral. Can you clarify? And Karsten, thank you, because that's, I think, what I've been sitting with throughout your entire talk, Vera. Thank you for capturing that so powerfully, Karsten.
Yeah, no, thank you, Carson. So I will not profess that I am a total expert in Buddhist psychology, but my understanding is that with the other sense organs, right, we can kind of see it more clearly. With the mind, right, you have this mind that, let's say, is resting in awareness. But then there's a thought. Somehow, I think because of, in the Buddhist cosmology, because this is not our first rodeo, right? Things are always arising, things are always being conditioned because of all the things that have happened in the past, right? So sometimes these thoughts, when we're not aware of it, they just seem to just appear, right? So let's say there is a thought that appears or a sensation from that thought. There's something that comes up in our mental awareness. And just as you said, right? The immediate, when we're aware of that thought and we have awareness of it, there's that sense of contact, right? A feeling tone immediately arises because of that presence of that thought, right? Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. right? So I think it's what you were explaining, right? That it is, let's say this thought comes up, and maybe it's a singular thought, but then we have a feeling about it, and then we have perception, um, we go on to usually create more thoughts about it, right? So it's not like necessarily something coming up from the void, but it's usually something that is already existing, and it's coming up in some way. They call these, well, like sankharas, right? Mental formations that exist. Um, and they're just kind of coming up, right? Maybe these are feelings that you've repressed for 30 years, right? That somehow, for different causes and conditions, are rearing up, and you suddenly feel this feeling. We don't have the full awareness to understand what triggered it or what made it come up, but there's something that comes up internally. And then we notice it. And then we have the choice, right? We continue creating and proliferating more thoughts and through our reaction to it, or we notice it as it is, we notice the feeling of it, we let it kind of move through our system. This is kind of how I understand it. Um, but I think this would be a great question also for like folks like Andrew Olinsky, or, people who might be able to explain it more fully. But this is kind of how I conceptualize that. Thank you for that.
Let's see. Corey shared this with us. Recently, I've noticed that I've responded to some painful situations with surprising equanimity and trying to resist congratulating myself too much. Are there times when it's appropriate to resist? What if Zelensky hadn't responded to feeling tone with resistance?
Let's see. Let me see that.
1147.
Often. Yeah. You know, wait, 1147. This is the fruits of our practice, right? Sometimes as we're practicing, we might see some benefit immediately, you know, show itself to us. But so much of our time, the practice is working in the background, making sense, clearing up things in the background. It's like your, I don't know, your computer system in the background is kind of cleaning itself up, cleaning the data, making sense of everything, right? Um, and all the while we are collecting data, we are managing our reactivity. And in this way, we're able to see things more clearly. And when we're able to see things more clearly, we can see more clearly when it is appropriate to act and when it is less appropriate to act. Right. And so this is why I say that it's not really the acting part is what comes next. Right. But the first part about preparing ourselves in a way that is most supportive and conducive to acting. That's what we're doing with this mindfulness practice, right? And yeah, this is what we need to make change, positive change in the world, right? So um, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because this is a big thing where a lot of people think that, oh, if we just practice acceptance, allowing things, right, like nothing gets done, right? Aren't we just going to be like little doormats where people just trot over us? Like, no, because we are preparing our armor, so to speak, right? We are preparing our strategy to be able to be most effective. Because, of course, we can act, we can react, we can act. But the question then becomes, is that the best, ideal, most effective way to respond? And if we're not mindful, oftentimes it might not be. Yeah, thank you for that.
And Cynthia was just saying, as you were responding, acceptance of what is does not preclude action.
Beautifully said.
Mhm. And Vera Rhonda had asked if there are some readings that you can share with us to maybe go a little bit deeper into this topic. And we now, after every Sunday, we always send a reminder email with a link to the recording. So perhaps if there are a couple that you would suggest, I can add some links in that message to go out to the community.
Good thing you asked. And I have some resources here that I found very helpful. Right, so two of the quotes that I mentioned at the end are from Sayadaw U Tejaniya. And he has this kind of compilation of teachings called Relax and Be Aware. I love them so much because it is very simple, right? Let me see. I don't know if you can see that very well,
Mhm.
but very simple teachings. And this is so much about having the right attitude, right? Another one is Mindfulness by uh, Joseph Goldstein, right? And so this is a very detailed, beautiful book that will delve deep into, all of these different foundations of mindfulness and ways to practice. So highly recommend these two. If you don't have them already, check them out and hope that helps us all with our practice.
Thank you for that. We always love some suggested readings. I've been reflecting community on that perhaps being a nice addition to our website to curate some readings that various teachers that come and visit us recommend. So thank you for
Lovely.
asking that, Rhonda.
And just so the folks on the recording can hear this, the book is Relax and Be Aware by Sayadaw U Tejaniya. And the other one is Mindfulness by Joseph Goldstein.
So I will read one more comment, Vera. I'm aware of the time we could spend all day with you, of course, but I'll just read something that Stephen shared a little bit earlier. The second arrow so often seems completely automatic. It's hard to imagine practicing in those moments with the second arrow so incredibly intense, instinctual, and out of our control.
Totally, Stephen. I'm glad you mentioned that. And it's just natural, right? Some things hurt more than others. Some things will be more painful. Something that I've found helpful, that my teachers and others have pointed out is when we're practicing, practice with what seems easier and doable, right? Like it might feel super overwhelming to practice with something so beyond our control, it seems. But this is the process of building that muscle with things that we can actually handle. It's like when you lift weights. You're not going to go for the huge, whatever, hundreds of pounds, but you're going to go with where you can actually handle first. And then over time, build that muscle to then be able to handle more situations, maybe with a little bit more equanimity, or maybe you realize it after, but you have more awareness, you have more desire to practice, right? So I hear you. This is hard, but over time, as we build this muscle, it does perhaps feel a little bit more easier as we go along. So thank you for that.
And on that note, community, we will be transitioning in just a moment to breakout rooms. So, again, if you have 15 minutes to spare, we will be opening those up in just a moment. And the structure is that you'd gather with maybe 4 members of the Sangha in a small group for continued reflection. And I saw throughout the chat that there were a couple of folks asking how Bart was doing, and I am sure he will be so grateful to know that. So he had his dental procedure this week, and he is currently on the mend. So very happy to say that we will see him next Sunday. He'll be teaching on the 5th. And everyone, I will certainly send him your good wishes. And Vera, um, passing it on to you in case you have any other gems of wisdom you want to share before we close, but also for a dedication of merit for our practice together today.
Thank you, everyone. And, you know, keeping in mind this beautiful intention and act of all of us to practice, to bring mindfulness and awareness to what we think, say, and do. May this be of great benefit to ourselves, bring us much peace and happiness. May this bring much peace and happiness, well-being to our loved ones and every single being that exists and coexist with us. So may you be happy, at peace, and may you be able to share this wisdom with others through your own practice and efforts. Thank you all. Be well, everyone.
Friends, the rooms are now open, so you should see an invitation to join one of them. And if you encounter any difficulty or wind up in a room by yourself, pop on out and I will make sure that you are connected with some Dharma friends. Thank you all for being with us.
Jessica, I think I'm going to have to head out,
Okay, thank you
but
so
thank you so
much
much. And
for
thank you
such a
for your
beautiful
sharing.
teaching.
It was, a lot to cover, but hopefully it folks can take, if even a little something from that, I'd
Well,
be
you
happy.
you delve so deeply and at the same time with such a light touch, and I love your storytelling. So I think it really resonated with people. And thank you for those book recommendations. I have not read any of them, so
Oh,
they are on my
you
list.
are in store for a great, what I love about this one is that it is so simple,
Yeah.
right? I actually learned about this because there's a guy who compiles and sends, it's called the daily Tejaniya.
Uh-huh.
So he'll send you a daily email.
Oh, I love that.
So, maybe that's a resource you can share for folks too, because you can just sign up to this email list and every day he'll send one little quote and lately he's been taking the teachings from here, like just one little
Uh-huh.
quote
Uh-huh.
a day, and they're just so helpful.
I love that. I love that. Well,
So,
wonderful to see you.
Right. Thank you,
Very
Jessica.
good. Thank you so much.
I hope all of the supportive conditions align so that, these professionals who are helping so many people, get what they deserve, and that you all, can celebrate with all of your efforts to make this happen.
Thank you. Thank
Mm.
you. Yeah, it's been a beautiful gift to see our community kind of coming together in such a powerful way.
Mm.
So I'm grateful for that. It will
You're
definitely
creating a
make
lot
us
of important
stronger.
structures. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So take
Great.
good care.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. You too. See you next
Bye-bye.
time.